folks. Well, we'll get started here and just go over a couple things. And then I'll turn it over to Jim Martin, our treasurer for the ACHA. First of all, thank you for joining us on this budget town hall meeting. And our hope is to provide a forum similar to what we would have in Naples, where on a yearly basis, our treasurer, in this case, Jim Martin, gives a report to the general membership, and then questions can be asked. The first thing we want to let you know is that we are recording, this, and so hopefully within the next day or two, we'll be able to post this video. We send it over to AJ, who then just chops out like the beginning when there's dead air and stuff like that, and then puts it up onto our media page. So if you have somebody that you know or that you reach out to that is not able to join us for whatever reason tonight, that will be up there as will in a couple days. So we'll make sure that we try, when you go look for it, please make sure you go and look on our ACHA page and click under about and then membership info. Also in this case, and if this is your first time at a webinar, is that you should have at the bottom of your screen, somewhere on that bottom line where all the options are, a option to click on for Q&A. And then what'll happen is that you will send a question. It will come to the panelists, and after Jim, as we go along here during the question and answer times, I'll read those questions out. We do ask that everyone has their names, and their team names are in our report, but they are not here. So if this was, like say if Jim Martin was asking a question, that he would put Jim Martin, Michigan State, just so we can kind of have that. So when you're writing out your question, just start out with typing what school you're from, and then put your question. We do ask that you keep your questions constricted to budget items. If somebody asks a question like, when is the ACHA planning on starting their season? I'll answer you nicely saying that's not something part of this town hall. Well, I'm sure we'll have future things, but then we want to keep it focused and we want to respect everybody's time. I'll do my best to make sure that if there's questions that are similar or the same, to note that the multiple people that ask the questions. But please understand that we'll try to be respectful of everyone as we go through these questions. All right. If you have any concerns or anything that pops up, like in our other meeting, when Mo decided not to unplug his guitar cable and got the hum. If something pops up like that, please reach out and I'll see if we can try to fix it for you. But we did do some sound checking. Obviously, Jim and I were having some chats, so you should be good to go. And so Jim, take it away, and we'll jump back in during the Q&A times. Well, hopefully, Jim, you okay?
Yeah, we're ready. So, can you see my slides? Oh, I got it. Oop. Oop. Happen. Let's see. Can you hear me still, Dave?
Yep.
And you can see my slides, right?
No.
Do you have to make me presenter or something?
No, I gave the ability. Everyone will love this behind the scenes stuff. I have it that who can share is all panelists.
Let's see. Oh wait, let's see. Share screen. I see. Gotcha. So I have to hit this, I bet.
There you go.
How about that? How about that? How about that? You can see that, a slide?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Dave, and welcome everyone to this year's financial update. And we'll go through, certainly in a very interesting year that we have, a little bit of truncated at the end of that, and very interesting times for this year and next. So we'll take a look at what's the same, what's different, and what's changed over that. And so when I talk about this year, I mean 2019, 2020. Next year is obviously 2021, and then last year is 18-19, which that's the numbers that I went over preliminarily at Naples. They're now finalized, not really much different. So, but I did list them together, and you should have a 3-column sheet that just shows last year and this year, and then a variance from each, just because there were a lot of questions about, what was different this year, given that, it was sort of a strange year. And for comparative purposes, I thought that might be helpful just to see, what a more typical year would look like, and then what, an odd year would look like. And so where we ended up this year, and so again, this is our membership summary from this year. We ended up with 70 teams in M1, M2 186, M3 126, Women's 1 and Women's 2 at 25 and 54 respectively. And this will get into some of the other things about the numbers in that, especially when we get to stipends. And that is, we've got a lot of moving pieces with the teams that have a lot of diversity in terms of, resources that they have, and infrastructure in terms of if it's run by somebody affiliated with the school, or, as I know, because I talked to just about everybody at some time regarding the payment of their invoices and that, or just somebody where a kid throws another kid the checkbook and says, "Hey, good luck. See you around maybe at the tailgates and that." So they all have varying degrees of support that they need in that. But with this number of teams, this number of players, and this number of coaches, we do have a lot of need for support, and it involves a lot of things administratively, including this year there was a new registration process, a lot of help with that. I intervene on a lot of things. They need, invoices, billings, vendor registrations, tax forms with our taxpayer ID number, working with the schools in terms of getting everything in. So that's where that comes in. And so if you look at our dues structure, though, if you look at our dues at the league with at $1,700, which is most of our teams, just between M2 and M3 is by far the bulk of the teams that we have. If you look at it as $1,700 for a team with 26 players, that's only $65 a player. That includes USA Hockey Insurance, which is a $46 value. And so we know in terms of what players like and what is important to players, and I know that having been a coach for 20 years, the USA Hockey Insurance is important to them because they also get to use that if they go play in a summer league or another league. It's more than likely that league is going to require that they produce a USA Hockey card. Otherwise, they got to pay the $46 to play in the summer. And so having that as an insurance is an added value for our team members and the players that we have in the league. And so really, I think that we do provide a lot of value for what we collect in dues and that. With all that other stuff or things like, the website, all of this is what's important to me as a coach and my players. Having a website with stats is key for the players. They look at that all the time. Having eligibility verification is important because I and my players want to make sure we're playing people that are eligible to play, and it's not just stocked with people who aren't really students. Enforcing the rules and coach and referee development are essential to make sure it's a good quality product and we keep getting better as a league. And then Safe Sport is, very important for everybody, including the school, that we're managing that liability that the teams may otherwise have. And this year with the new website, we had a lot of things that came in terms of automatic checking of Safe Sport and auto alerting, and it's also done proactively rather than, a little bit after the fact as before. And so that was a huge step forward with the new website. That's a little bit off topic for this meeting and that, but the schools definitely appreciate, and I know when I go to see our director of sports, that having that check is huge in terms of the school's view of the organization, and that it's actually run professionally, and they're less concerned about any sort of issues with something going on with the teams and that. And so just the Safe Sport piece of that's very important to everybody. But so even where, a lot of people say, well, there's a lot of admin in that, those all, I guess, on one level are somewhat administrative, but they still create value for the teams and the players, just in terms of the expectation of what people want to see in a league and in a competitive thing. In terms of the way our systems are laid out, this is the same as last year. There's no changes to it yet. We still have the same treasury management system that manages a lockbox. We receive ACHs through that. A lot more schools, and you'll see in another slide, a lot more schools are now moving to electronic payment just because they've moved to remote campus and that. And so as they move to less of an in-person process, they've asked for a lot more vendor registrations too, just because that's going to be the new way of doing it, is electronic payment rather than having somebody in the office cutting checks and that. So, and then we do have an interface still from Point Streak, although that was not used last year for things. People had to go to the ACHA store to pay that. And we still have the Square website, which is the Warrior Team Stick program, and so that's still in there. It all goes into a single treasury management system where we can track everything, pull out, history and detail of everything. And they still go to this independent CPA firm on a monthly basis for have a bank reconciliation performed, and they do a review of what's going on with it. And so that's the check on what's going on with all of our financial systems and that. In terms of trends and issues, this is what we're seeing and things are going. Again, there's a lot more verifications, and then also a lot of that within the same time is there's a lot more formal vendor registrations. And so teams are actually asking for verification that we're a legitimate business. We have to provide our W-9. We have to send our tax information over to them. A lot of times I have to fill out a multi-page vendor form that talks about this and that, and certify we're not related to anybody that works at the school, all the things you'd expect in a good vendor program and that. And as I mentioned, a lot more schools want to pay electronically in the future in that. As I said before, this year, we did not have a payment option through Point Streak because we didn't use Point Streak registration. The payment module was at the direct end of registration, and that end thing of registration would kick you into that payment screen. You could print an invoice and then pay right there if you had a credit card. Since we used a different registration system last year, that wasn't available, and we either got a payment by check or they had to go to the web store and then pay with the credit card there. So it wasn't incredibly disruptive. It was just a bit of a change, and then there may be a new processor with a new website. One of the things I think Craig sent in his updates is that we are working on a new website that will be more of our own and more customizable, and that would have its own payment module, and we would have a new payment portal through that. And I've talked to them about how we do that securely and putting in appropriate controls for making sure we get the information needed to reconcile all the payments received in that. When you look at the financial statements that you should have received already, the comparative between last year and this year, it's still broken down. I reorganized it and sorted it just like I presented last year, which seemed to make a lot more sense to everybody in terms of grouping the revenues and expenses by programs that we have. And as opposed in the past, the way QuickBooks kind of sends it out, it's just income and then expenses, but they're not related to each other. But I think the format where it's grouped by program is a lot more user-friendly and a lot more insightful for what's going on with stuff. And similar to what we did last year, the ones that you should have in front of you right now, assuming you're looking at it, is going to be that exact same thing in that term of that thing. A bit about the national tournament, because I know there is questions about that. Again, it was canceled really the week before it was scheduled to go. And I think it was M1 was the first one scheduled to go. And so we were well underway in terms of preparation for that. I mean, it was pretty much just, hit the button and go. Everything was in place. Everything was very much well underway. We had all the hotels booked, travel was booked, decorations and everything ready to go up into the rinks. All of that was down there. We had everything ready to go. And we were monitoring for the week or two before that very closely. And I know Craig was sending out updates about, how we make a go, no-go decision. We did a lot with, watching what the NHL was doing, what USA Hockey was doing with their spring tournaments, with what a lot of the state programs were doing with theirs. And, they were all still green lighted until, that week of March 13th. And, once, the NHL canceled and USA Hockey canceled, that was pretty much stick a fork in her. And so we right away went back and it was trying to get either refunds or to back out of as much of stuff as we possibly could. And they really fall into a couple categories in terms of how that was, how we were able to, reverse a lot of that stuff, which is all reflected in the financials that we'll go through, is where we could, and some things we could cancel and get a refund. For example, there's scaffolding that we will put up over the, over the stands in order to mount the cameras on. That was all fully canceled, fully refunded. All the hotels that we booked, we hadn't checked in yet, so that was all fully refunded in that. And then some travel was refundable. And so where we could, we got refunds on that. Some of the rental cars and things like that, those were refunded. They went back on the credit card and that. A lot of the airfare, though, was in that category where it was not refundable, but it was cancelable, they would take a fee depending on the airline. If it was through the Southwest travel program and that, there was no change fee, but you don't get the money back. And so we've got credits from that. And other airlines, if it was like Delta, for example, there was a cancellation fee of about $150, a change fee, and then you get a credit for the rest. And so Craig has been working to track those credits, and those credits will be available for staff travel next year. Assuming we get going with something that requires travel next year, or in the future, whenever we have the need for future travel, those credits will all be able to be used rather than going out and buying new tickets and that. And then some things that we couldn't get out of is what's in an expense category. As the aforementioned airfare change fees, can't do anything about that. That's just gone. There was a lot of printing, and of course, one of the things we've done with the tournament in the last couple of years is really have it very impactful and a very visual effect when you walk in. With logos, tournament logos. Some of the drop-down banners, a lot of the signage that we've got, things to direct people where to go, all that have our logo on there, and we're not going to be in Dallas again. And so all that stuff is, we canceled some things that we could. There were some orders that still hadn't been processed yet. We stopped those and canceled them. But the bulk of it was already ready to go. It was in Dallas, ready to be hung up at the beginning of the next week. And so those are all in the expense category under the national tournament. I think it's under decorations or printing that's there. But the stuff that we did have, we're going to send back out to the team still in what I would call a qualifying team memorabilia package. And so every team that was bound for the national tournament is going to get a package with, for example, we already had those signs that are made up. If you remember last year, each team that was there had a sign that was in the stands. So we're going to send those signs with the team names and logos. There's also a locker room magnet that were already produced that had the team names on it. Those go on the door of the lockers. And then we've got some other things like the belt buckles and the medals, which were already in our hands when that was canceled, that will also go out to the teams in that. And so the stuff that we couldn't get out of, the stuff that was produced and expensed, we're going to send that out to the teams that qualified as a bit of a memorabilia package for what might have been with a national tournament and that. But so it's making the best use out of the stuff that we couldn't cancel and the things that we did have to pay for. So I did receive a question prior to the start of this about stipends. I think the person kind of mentioned that they thought they were very high and they weren't driven towards member service and that. I kind of chuckled. It was an amusing question just because the person that asked it received a stipend from the ACHA last year. It was paid by check. They cashed the check. They didn't ask any questions about why they were being paid, and they didn't send the check back. So I'm assuming they meant it's this year's stipends, not last year's stipends, that are the ones that they wanted to talk more about. So we'll go through the stipends, who receives what in terms of this. And so this is really the staff of, I will call this the executive director staff. And there we have Craig, of course, is a full-time person along with Mo Stromel. Craig doing all of his stuff, and I think everybody's pretty familiar with what he does. Mo does all of our compliance work, the director of hockey operations, looking at eligibility stuff, high-level appeals, all the registration stuff like that. And then Ed Krzyzewski and Chris Perry served sort of dually in terms of the PR director. And so all the press releases, all the things you see on the social media accounts, they would write those things and get those posted and presented out there. Dave, our host for the evening, in addition to being our host, spearheaded the team compliance stuff, the grade sheets with the league commissioners. Again, a high point of value for a team is making sure that everybody's eligible and they're not just recruiting people off the street that aren't really even students in order to do that. And so Ed Giacomucci is our referee in chief, and as I mentioned, every year he's also responsible for administering the vision program for our referees that we have, and somewhat successfully sometimes. And then Russ, our national tournament director. And even though there wasn't a tournament this year, Russ was the person that had all those things in place, and primarily was the person getting all the refunds back. And so that was his stipend amount for the year too. And so that would be the executive staff, all of which, as a coach in the league and a coach with players, I recognize the value of what they bring to the organization in terms of, generating a positive image and creating a league that everyone, including incoming players, can be proud of. And so I don't think there's anything there that I would point to and say, well, that doesn't benefit a team or a player in some way. In terms of the actual direct stuff, the things that are working with the teams and that, this is just separated by the divisions, and I ran out of room, so I put the women's divisions together at the bottom. But so we have at M1, we have Brian and Dan. M2, we have John, and then 4 regional coordinators. M3, Sarge did a great job stepping in and helping out. If you remember, we had a different person as it was Sam Kelly as the commissioner, who sadly passed away in the fall, and Kenny did a great job and stepped up and took that over. Which is why there's only 3 remaining coordinators there. And then at the women's division, Molly and Taylor do a great job holding it down there. So again, these stipends are directly contacting teams, working with them all the time about everything from reviewing things like fines. I know we did there was some fines this year came through in that, talking to the teams about registration, about their grade sheets, about all the stuff that a team may need. This structure, by the way, and this structure in terms of our commission structure, which is very similar to last year, which is again why we don't need to go over last year. It's just about the same structure, just with some of the chairs moved around to different people in that. But this is directly because it was about 5 or 6 years ago, all the surveys we were sending out, there was an absolute identified desire from the teams in the league that they wanted more of a support net, that they felt that it was hard to get a hold of people. And they didn't have people that could help them administer their teams always. And they said they wanted to get more support and more direct contact with somebody that would be there when they would need someone, when they had a need for a service or a question or a resource, that they had somebody that they could call and get a hold of. And this was the structure that we came up with. So again, this is all designed to provide value back directly to the teams and keep everybody functioning and being able to worry about the hockey stuff, not the overall compliance stuff. So in terms of the financial highlights, this is very similar to the top one that we had, 18-19. Sorry, the cat did show up today, so stop. I'll try to throw him on the floor again. So in terms of 18-19, that's the numbers that we did go over in Naples last year preliminarily. I see an error already in there. And so we did have a national tournament. This is last year's national tournament. We had a surplus of about $14,000 at the end of the day with that, and the ACHA total just about $40,000 surplus in that. And that second section, that second bullet, which is obviously wrong, should say 1920. So this year, what we're projecting for this year is a surplus of nearly $12,000, so $11,787 in terms of a surplus this year. And our cash, our current cash that we've got, we have a current cash balance of 121 or 221, 101. We're still waiting for the Texas Trust money from last year's tournament. They were slow, and we gave them all the documents they needed for that. We sent more documents that they needed that. They acknowledged that we are set to go with that, and then with COVID, they sort of went on a hiatus in that. But we do have recent communication from them that they are set to go and be ready to begin repaying and paying out those credits that are qualified and approved out there. So we are approved. We're just waiting for the gears down in Texas to get going again. I know that they just recently went off lockdown, and so hopefully that's something that they get to pretty quickly. With that, we also still owe our USA Hockey dues for the year, which is about $220,000, and so or about $320,000. So we still have a cash excess of about $50,000 even after we pay off USA Hockey with that this year. So looking at the appeals, this was something that came out last year that somebody asked about the appeals. They had paid an appeal and wanted to make sure that we had got their name in there, and so this is our honor roll of those people that had filed an appeal this year. Again, the appeal fee is $250. So each one of these players and teams would pay the $250. And as specified when that was put in, that is a donation to a charity. And so again, this year, that was made to Hockey Coaches Care. So we did round that up the last $250. So it's a nice round number in that. And they were very, very genuinely grateful for that. And it'll be featured as in the final issue of the year for the Starts and Stops magazine, with all their gratitude for what we do to help out that organization. Again, if you're not familiar with Hockey Coaches Care, it's with the AHCA, and they provide grants to hockey families, so coaches or players who sort of have a tragedy and a need for capital and something to help them get through the tough times that are out there. So they do terrific work in that, and they always you can always see in Stops and Starts what they do with the money they collect, not just from us but from their members as well. And so it does do they do a lot of really terrific work with that too. So we applaud them on that. So and then, as I mentioned, that's got the preliminary the comparative financials that are there. We've got the 2018-19 is what we reviewed in Naples. They were preliminary, now they're final in that. And then we also got the preliminary 19-20 financials for this year. They should be very close to what we will end up with. There's not anything I know of that's not processed or pending, but there is always late stuff to come in. And then when it goes to the CPA firm for the final review, the final month's reconciliation, and then also they make adjustments in preparation of the tax returns. So they might change a little bit, but I don't think they're going to change very much this year. So we'll hold on to questions for a minute. Let's see if I do this. If I go like this. Let's see. Go like this. Okay, and so we should be seeing what looks like the same PDF that you've got in front of you there. So, Dave, are you seeing that, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So that's terrific. So, so the way this lays out, you can see here is last year's numbers and then this year's numbers, and then we just calculate a variance with that. And so the Warrior Stick program sales, did better this year. A lot more people took advantage of that. Again, that's through the web store that comes through Square, goes right into the account, and then Warrior ships that out directly with that. All we do is forward it. We don't handle the stuff. We don't inventory the stuff. We don't own any of that stuff. We just are the order processing for that. And it's done as a benefit for the member teams. It's some decent deals out there, which is certainly something every team can use. And so that we do as a service to our teams. We run that site with that. And again, we get to keep the difference between what we get, that's the sales price, and the cost of goods sold. And so we actually made about $2,000 more this year than we did last year. And so that was a terrific thing, and everybody seems to really appreciate that. There's a lot more product out there, and we did try to get more goalie stuff out there too this year. And even some gloves and pants that a number of teams have taken advantage of. Again, the pricing on that's very, very good in that. So on to the national tournament. Now, we did get some questions about that and what all the stuff in here is and that. So again, we avoided all the revenue. So all the sources of revenue that we have from this year, aren't going to come in. There was really nothing that we collected in terms of sales or ticket sales. The 19,441 is the hotel commission from last year's tournament that came in this year. And again, the hotels send that, much after the fact of the tournament. So all that stuff was received this year. Some of it's still coming in, still some of it's coming in yet. I think we still have a couple of hotels that haven't paid that. And again, Russ Slagle, our tournament coordinator, is following up on those hotels. He leans on them all the time and that. So the stipends for the national tournament, as I mentioned, that's Russ Slagle there, the work he did on that. The trophies and awards was actually an invoice from last year that was the shipping to send all the stuff down there and to send the stuff back with teams and that. There's a bunch of boxes they send, so that was a late shipping invoice. And then also the cost of the, I think that was about $900, and then the rest is some of the awards and medals that we're going to be sending out to the teams and that. Signage, decoration to displays, about 9,000 of that was a late printing invoice that we got, was paid this year, so that's from last year's tournament. So about 15,000 was the total for the print stuff from this year. The logos, the signage, the pop-ups, all those banners that you see when you go to the national tournament, that were all done, and not in a USA or ACHA logo, but rather the tournament logo, so they're not going to be reusable with that. Staff apparel was all the jackets and that. A lot of that we can reuse because they did not have the logo on it. And so since it has just the ACHA logo, a lot of that we have available to use in the future in that. And the staff travel that's the airfares, and that the piece that was either non-refundable or not able to be refunded yet. And so I did back out the piece. There's an estimate that would be available for future years, but that's the level of expense we're looking at with that. And so in total, our national tournament, we had expenses this year of $57,000 minus the if you take off the $20,000 that we had from last year. So the cost for national tournament this year was about $37,000. Again, a pretty significant swing, although not surprising since we didn't hold it. So again, this would be what we expected again, and what we had in our budget was this would again be zero or positive the way it was last year, as we will expect it to be going forward. And unfortunately, because we dropped all the revenue but had costs that we couldn't avoid, it did result in a loss to the organization for that event this year. So again, not really surprising given that we canceled it a week before it was scheduled to start in that. So again, with the same thing, we avoided the broadcast expense, and these are expenses from the prior year. This was a late invoice that we received, or something that we received about the stipends or the fees and the amounts that were to be paid to the broadcasters last year. This came in, very, very late after the event, and we did pay those people, but that was actually broadcast related to last year's event. So on the select team stuff, these are the select team player fees. So this is the amount here, $47,250 is the amount this year that we collected from the players this year, and you can see this compared to what last year's select team was. So we ended up spending about $7,800 more this year. The bulk of the change this year was in the cost of the visas for players. Player visas went through the roof for some reason to go to Russia, and again, this trip was to the Siberian facility that they've got out there, and so the airfares were quite a bit more. This is one of the programs that we're really looking at very hard for next year, and it's very uncertain to say what that will, if that's going to go. It would be very doubtful, but again, that's what we're looking at in terms of next year's budget and next year's programs, which is all right now up in the air, pending seeing what the schools are going to do when they get the kids back to campus and what sort of events they allow and where people are going to be able to go. So net cost to us is, we try to keep to about $60,000. This year it was a little bit more, $64,000. Again, this is a program that the divisions, both M2 and M3, have continuously said that they like to see and they like to have out there. And so again, if you disagree with that, or you think there should be refinements or changes or go somewhere else or something else with that program, again, that's a divisional thing, and you should bring that up in your divisional meetings or raise that to your divisional VP. So this is the ACHA national meeting. Again, somebody asked about that. This is the hotel bill for last year, and again with the beach hotel, we have a master account that's unified with the AHCA. When we get the bill and we go over it with them, we go over it, split it up, and that it's just paid in the following year because that's when we have it and it's due. So it's just messing around with those things. So these are all things from last year's travel. Some of this travel though, there is airfare in here that was canceled but not refundable. Again, there was a fee that was a loss of that. A lot of people from the board and the commissioners had already booked their airfare. So a lot of this is non-refundable airfare that's in there, and some small remaining expense reports which came in from people after the year end, and so that was paid out as well. So top part though, and by the way, you can't add these together. This one for last year, 54, is about what it costs us every year. This one had all the travel for last year's one and the hotel from the prior year before that, which is in this $29,000. One of the things I did this year that's different is I broke out, since this is just kind of a big number that doesn't have a lot of detail in it, I did break out, and we'll be presenting that in the future differently in terms of what the banquet costs us, and then what the meeting food and beverages cost. And so this meeting food and beverage is the breakfast, the lunch, all the things like that. And then there's the meeting room stuff that goes in there too. So this will be split up in terms of just to give more visibility into what that looks like. So, but you can see the difference in expenses. So from year to year on that. So regional is really about the same as what happens every year in that. So again, referees went up a little bit, or actually they went down a little bit. Again, that's just a local rate variance based on where they are. Some refs are cheaper, some are more expensive than that, but really very close year to year in terms of what regionals look like going on out there. So the All-Star event did not happen this year. And so there's 0 expenditures for the All-Star event. Last year was about $22,000 is what that is. The big part of that is, of course, the local team transportation. We pay a lot for refs, and then local team transportation is basically the bus that drives back and forth between the host hotel, the rink, and the airport to pick people up. So we do run that shuttle in that. Sales for this year, again, this is our referee patches and our score sheets, and then of course the helmet stickers are all also in there, although we just give those away. Those are just a free item, but that's all in there. Again, it's sold a little bit more score sheets than last year. Again, and this year we did discontinue the 3-part sheet, so everybody's on the 2-part sheets going forward, just the white and the yellow, and there are no more pink sheets. And so there are new versions of that form to accommodate the new 3 goalie rule, and so that's on there with the extra slot for the goalie. If you get the new score sheets, you'll notice there is not a separate line for your name and signature as a coach. You'll have to write that on one line or do something else with it, but it also has an extra slot in there for person. So if you don't dress an extra goalie, you'll have an empty slot. And so until you get used to it, I always, when I fill out that score sheet, go down to the bottom and make sure it's all, all the lines are filled. You'll have an extra one unless you dress a third goalie, which again is allowable there. So on to the stuff that's not related to a program, more the administrative costs and that. This is our membership dues, which are down a little bit. We did have some teams leave last year, and so dues as expected are down a little bit. Late fees were up a little bit, just some people having trouble getting in. Application fees were down, although this is something that's still going on now. I think in the last week I've gotten 3 or 4. This is the time of the year that teams are applying. We are still getting application fees in for next year. I think we got, as I say, 2 or 3 in the last week. I expect some more coming in too. And so this number will tend to go up, but there are schools out there that are looking to add either programs or brand new programs to the ACHA and that. And so this year then we've got the new $10,000. This is the JOG, $10,000 sponsorship for JOG. And you've probably gotten their either emails about their jersey programs and packages and that, and so we're glad to have that in there. So in terms of administration, we got the accounting fees. Those are going up a little bit, but again, that's money well spent. They look over the financials, do the reconciliations and that, and that's still a reasonable rate for all the stuff they do for us. The legal fees is Stu Grimson, our counsel, and so this is the adjudication of, and I think this year, all the stuff that I saw was all safe sport related. So it's really looking at the things related to safe sport red alerts and cleaning those up and properly adjudicating those and making sure that those things are all taken care of and properly addressed to help us manage our legal liability. The outside contract services, this was last year. This is last year's PR contract. That was discontinued. We don't have that anymore. And so that's why we now have a person that was doing that. Ed Krasinski started that, and then we finished up with somebody else, but this is no longer a contract. And we don't have that as an expense anymore. Depreciation is just depreciation, of course, on our assets. Primarily, that's video equipment that we own. Some PC stuff, though, and that's going down because we're on the tail end of those things. It's not a very long, useful life in that, but that'll be going down again. So postage, donations is there's 2 things in here. There's $1,200 that we made a donation to Sam Kelly. Sam, as I mentioned before, was our D3 commissioner who passed away in the fall. There was a GoFundMe that was set up by his old hockey program, IUP, and we donated $1,200 to that just because the way GoFundMe works is they scrape the first $200 off that, and so it'll net to that family of $1,000. Sam was involved with the ACHA since, at least the late '90s, early 2000s when I came in. He was, I think, one of the first things I went to was a tournament at IUP. Did various things for the ACHA over the years, and so we did send that. Along with that in there is the Hockey Coaches Care donation in that, and so that's included in that as well. So Credit card processor fee, that was last year, that related to the payments coming through Point Streak. Again, they would take a 3% thing of that. We didn't gross up to recover that. And so since we didn't go through Point Streak, there is no credit card processor fee there as well. So printing is just our stuff, supplies, it's our office supplies, things like that. Storage is just a place that I have. It's about $100 a year that I have to keep all this stuff that I've accumulated from national tournament and stickers and score sheets and that. So website administration is the Point Streak fees and that. Website development is, we're working on a new website. The deal on the new website is it's a fee of $30,000 to develop a fully custom website, after which we own that. And the contract we're on during the period of development, testing, implementation of that is, I think they charge us like $1,500 per month that goes in there. That's in that category, along with some of the travel costs that we had some people go down, talk to them about speccing it out and doing the design of those things as well. Software license cost is something I split out from the old website administration, because just to show that a lot of what we pay for is, we've got the stuff that makes things work, the stuff that allows us to do our work. We've got a couple licenses of Microsoft Office. We have a couple of Adobe Acrobats, and then we also have our email system, which is Gmail, which based on the number of email accounts that we have is, a couple $100 a month. And so to break that out, that's under software license costs now, just to give that a little more visibility and see where we can track that. USA Hockey fees, since the number of teams is down, also went down. So again, that's the $700 per team times the number of teams that was on the first slide out there. AHCA membership fees, this is from the beginning of the year. That was the membership fee for D1 for this year. So again, that was a prepay for this year, and that's in this year. So and trophies and awards, these are the postseason awards. So this is the regional and national players of the year. Some of the All-American stuff's in there too. Again, stipends we went over, computer ranking, and then ACHA staff travel is people going to anything that's not related to a program. And so it's people going to Dallas to meet with people down there, going to Orlando to meet with the web developer, going to various tournaments and things that they may, go to a regional event or something that one of the schools is having on, recruiting fairs, and the U.S. and attendance at the USA Hockey meetings go into that staff travel category too. And so there we can see at the end, we've got our total summary down there, 11,787, again, subject to revision based on what things may happen in the future in that. So, so there we are all the way through there. So let's go back to our questions box, and we can see what's coming in here on questions. Jog Athletics is the only.
They can't see this. Sorry, Jim, but I'll read it out. So,
well, I can read it too. Yeah, Dan is.
Okay.
What do others provide to the ACHA in place of revenue to be an association sponsor? Is getting in more national association sponsorship in anyone's job descriptions? This seems extremely low for an association the size of the ACHA. Absolutely, I agree, Dan. And that's something we've looked at. That's absolutely in Craig's wheelhouse, and it was in our prior executive director's wheelhouse. That what we're looking for is, really that one big sponsor that, the Microsoft, the Coca-Cola, the Marlboro, the Molson type thing. I'm kidding about the last two. But we are looking for that national sponsor, maybe Microsoft or a bank or something like that. The other sponsors that we have do provide fees, although they've not been billed that yet. They usually get billed at the end of the year. That is Howie's is $2,500. We will not be getting, I don't think, I've got to pull the contract on the Barron's rings. I believe that there may be a small base in that, but what we get is a percentage of their fee in selling national tournament rings. So they sell championship rings to the tournament winners. We get a cut of those. And so I can't remember if there's like a $500 floor in that or not, but that's the sponsorships that we have. But I totally agree. If you look at the numbers that we have for players and students in the league, that there is a lot of opportunity out there to find that marquee sponsor out there. I mean, if you look at everything that they say, what they say in terms of that being of a desirable metric or market, that there should be something out there. And by the way, if anyone has any ideas, like if anyone on the call or anyone or teams if you know somebody at Microsoft Marketing or Microsoft student or nonprofit or something like that, we absolutely would love to talk to them and get the contact with that. We've looked for a person to make those intros for a number of years in that, and certainly it's something we're always looking for. So Karen Weaver asks, with the abrupt stop of the economy, will there be an increase in annual dues? Asking for both men and women's teams here at UM Dearborn. Thank you. We absolutely are not looking at any sort of membership dues increases for next year. In fact, what we're looking at is in terms of when schools are ready to go back to play, if we adjust the dues for a shortened season. That's what we're trying to look at, and that's what we're trying to look at and see how those things come out. If we don't run all the programs, if schools can't start until December, if schools start but can't play a full schedule, what does that do to the national tournament bids and invites? So how many teams are going to be at nationals? All that stuff's in the air. And so basically, in getting into the next question, the budget for next year is basically at zero. We don't know what is going to happen. We don't know what's going to go on with our programs, what schools are going to be able to do, or what they're going to allow. I'm at Michigan State. We just were told this year our students are coming back on campus this year. There's been no word yet about, and that'll be all the other things that have to happen, if you look at it as a plan, about whether or not students will be allowed to participate in non-academic group activities of any sort. And after that, then, is whether or not they'll be able to engage in recreational sports activities, non-varsity sports and other similar activities. Is that going to be allowed? And if that's allowed, are they going to be allowed to travel out of state or across the state or within the state or travel anywhere offside of campus? Those are all big questions. If you look at some of the schools that are announced their plans to come back, things like Notre Dame announced that they're going to start in mid-August and then have the kids have finals and not come back after Thanksgiving, because again, they're worried about everybody going home over Thanksgiving break and then coming back to campus, having been exposed to a whole, new population of people. And so there may very well be other restrictions that are placed on those things. So, but yeah, it's all on the table, and we're having discussions about that now. But right now, it's just a wait and see. It's just a wait and see what's going to happen with those things as well. So, okay, I hope that answered the question. If not, feel free to let me know if you had other questions with that. So, so we have Mike Kanakaris and the SCHC questions. Do we have a budget for 2021? Actually, no, we don't have one. We had one that was very well rounded out in that, but with the change in programs, we have to see what it's going to look like. Obviously, if teams don't come back in the fall semester, that's going to change absolutely the profile of, stipends, just for one thing. In a normal year, though, the budget process is done by, we take a look. I sit down with Craig. We review what programs we had from last year. We identify any changes that need to be made in the programs. I give him support with any of the numbers he wants to see, any of the detail where things came in, all sorts of things happen with that. He adjusts that. He presents that to the board for approval, and then that approved budget is used for approving the expenditures that I get. If I get something that's not a charge that comes in, or expense, or somebody traveled, or something that is not on the budget that we have, then I have to call somebody and get some approval of that. It usually goes to Craig, who then contacts whoever did it, asks them what that was, then we look at those things. I suppose there is a budget committee that's just Craig and I right now, although certainly any of the other board could go through that and that. There are no minutes that we keep with that. It's really an iterative process as we go, and putting those things together with that. What effect will a significant loss of member teams, whether by potential disbanding or departure, on the budget and ultimately ACHA operations in general? Yeah, I mean, that's something that if there was a significant decrease in the number of teams for any reason, that's something we'd have to look at. Obviously, if the team counts went down, that would mean that we would consolidate the staff. We'd pay less stipends. We'd have possible restrictions and reducing the regional tournament format. For example, D3, men's D3 right now is 124 teams. If that went down to 60 teams, I don't think we would have a regional play-in that would involve each and every one of those teams. So, in fact, at 60, I don't think they could fill it because it's 64 right now. So, all those things change when there's those things. And when teams left last year, that was somewhat of a wild card, not seeing where that was. There was a request to have teams declare where they were going to go, just so we could restart and see what the programs look like. That was baked into the budget for this year. And we'd continue to do that. If there was a bunch of teams decided to go somewhere else, then we would basically start over from scratch and say, well, here's what we project dues to be, and what programs we want to offer with that. So assets, liability, equity, the ACHA, there's no page. Yeah, I don't have the balance sheet included here. I can certainly send a balance sheet. Let's see, full copy of the financial audit for 2018-19. Sure, I can send the auditor's report that we got. And services not rendered, no nationals, no national meeting, no all-star challenge expected. What is the expected refund? Right now, there's not an expected refund. And looking at the financials and the programs, and that's where you have to see, those programs didn't happen. It would on one level be very, very difficult to figure out who should be refunded what. They're not uniformly accessed by teams, and to try to decide, who would be refunded, get a refund for not having a Naples meeting would be, very, very difficult. Personally, and speaking just as me as a coach, I would not expect a refund just because I don't view any of the programs in the ACHA as being a la carte. So we don't have a charge for attending the national tournament. We don't charge for a person going to the All-Star Challenge. It's a program that teams participate in. And if my team and my players don't access those things, then, we still just have a level of dues with that. Getting back to an ACHA view, though, if you feel there should be one, you can certainly bring that up to your divisional VP in that. Again, it would have to be brought to the board by them and approved, because I, as the treasurer, don't decide what we pay. I pay what has been authorized by the board, either through the budget process or by some other request for something like that. So broadcast expenses of $16,500. We went over that in great detail last year. That was in the separate financial meeting that we had. We do own that figure for the equipment is probably pretty accurate, about 30 grand. I believe it is something like that we own. Broadcast expenses for last year was a lot of travel in that. We did have other quotes for that. We had other companies do that in the past. I don't think it was, quite that much. It was at least, I think the one in Columbus was, just speaking offhand, I think was like $35,000 and was an absolute nightmare. They dropped the coverage. The coverage was terrible. It was 2 cameras. It was really very inoperable. And we had a person down there that basically, when we'd start getting texts that the feed's not working, she would run around and yell at people. And so that clearly was not the thing. But we did consider a lot of vendors. We looked for a lot of vendors that would do that, and that was the direction that the board chose to go in. So let's see the next question there. I gotta go down. Tim Griscoll, given the reduction in dues revenue last year as a result of teams with CHF and other revenues last year, what is your sense for the coming season in terms of additional loss or gains? And when does it reach a point where you think begins to become a significant concern with the potential of increased dues? That's Tim. Oh, I should read that, Chloe. He's talking about, given the reduction in dues revenue last year as a result of teams leaving, sense of the coming season in terms of additional loss or gains, and when does it reach a point where you think it becomes a significant concern with the potential increased dues? Again, there's not been anyone has suggested a dues increase for any purpose, it's something that we would, it would have to be something drastic. If there was just, to me, if there was just a further reduction in teams, that would be something that, we need to identify in the budget process and reduce the cost of our programming. As I mentioned, the easiest thing is that, less teams is less support, is, less stipends, refining the regional tournament depending on how many teams go and from where, if it were to continue, and then how many new teams come in. I mean, we still do get we still do get a number of applications each year, and so the net over time, hopefully we get more teams coming in than decide to leave. So, but again, that's something we have to balance each time, and we do project that out. And so again, the budget for this year was still projected to be break even. It was just the national tournament cost that we couldn't recover, which we were fully planning to do, is what messed that one up. So. So let's see, Ryan Van Daniker in Kentucky reports the accrual basis. How come there's so many items that relate to different accounting periods prior year next year that are in these reports? That's a good question, Ryan. And it's really just a function of the things that come in after we cut off. They do say accrual. That's what QuickBooks keeps it in. When the expenses come in, though, we do pay them when they're due. And, I don't make an accrual for those expenses on that. So, that it is an accrual basis on QuickBooks, not cash. But it's a lot of the expenses that come in, those ones in national tournament that, came in. I wasn't expecting those. Nobody was expecting those. The one about the broadcasters, we were unaware that was coming in. And so it came in. It was a surprise. We went back and talked to people about it and came up with a resolution. But, that's point well taken on that. So. If teams don't come back to the campus in the fall, can the ACHA offset a portion of their dues from savings in 2020 spring cancellations? This has come up with our league. Andrew, CCC. If not, will these teams be given some break if majority of schools are playing in the fall? That's something certainly we can look at. I know there's been a number of teams that have asked about if there is a shortened season next year, and there are actually teams that are prepaying dues because they have money left in their budget for this year and they want to prepay it. I've talked to them and said, yeah, if there's a dues decrease because we don't have programs, we can do that. We can certainly look and see about applying some of that in terms of next year. Again, the stuff is so wildly open about the budget and dues and everything else for next year, just because we just don't know what's going to happen with that. But, again, no matter what, if, we get started or don't, there's nothing on the table that says dues increase. And if programs get further restricted in that, it likely be a reduction in that. So let's see, Dave, did you have something you wanted to throw in on that last one too? I thought I saw you have your hand up or something too.
No. So folks, just to let you know, as of right now, that we do not have any questions in the Q&A. So if there is something you'd like to bring up, now would be the time. Because if not, then we will bring the meeting to a close. So we'll just wait another minute or so. But
well, and it's not closing the door. You can email me directly about any questions anyone has. I'm always thrilled to talk about the financials and stuff. So feel free to email me with any sort of questions that you may have or any other information you may need. So. So how's everybody doing? Is stuff getting started? What are you guys seeing out there? You can ask about that or share ideas, things like that too. So it is a town hall after all. So
all right. Well, Jim, looks like we don't have any more coming in. So okay. So I think we're going to close this up, but I'm going to ask that if you guys have any other further questions that you would like to indicate for Jim, you can always reach out to him. I believe it's jmartin@achahockey.org.
Yep, that's right. Or treasurer at achahockey.org works too. So.
Yep. And again, we'll be keeping these updated. I know that in my role, talking with Craig and Mo during the year, we'll probably be having a few more of these, hopefully between now and the beginning of the season, just to kind of keep you updated as we get closer and closer, and hopefully have a little better handle on what's going to happen in terms of the start of the season. So again, if you need any emails, feel free to reach out. Again, this will be processed and sent in to be posted by AJ. as soon as it finishes processing, as well as we'll be asking Jim, we'll be taking your information that you have made, your slides and your report will be put up onto the ACHA website. Look under membership info, under about the ACHA. And if that's it, guys, I hope you have a great evening, and we will talk to you later.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for attending, everyone.